Okay, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down the absolutely massive stakes of the 2026 World Cup by taking a magnifying glass to the top tier of heavyweights. When we look ahead to the next global showdown, the narrative is already incredibly dense. We've got reigning champions, fallen giants desperate to reclaim their former glory, and golden generations staring down what is literally their final chance at immortality. But to truly understand how this tournament might play out, we have to cut through all the noise and focus purely on the absolute top of the food chain.
So we are strictly focusing on these 7 defining contenders. Now you might be wondering, why just 7? Well, looking closely at the overall landscape, these are the nations with the sheer talent, the historical pedigree, or the tactical infrastructure to realistically lift the trophy. Throughout this explainer, we're going to break down their tactical strengths, their glaring weaknesses, and of course, those absolutely crucial superstar factors that can make or break an entire month-long tournament.
To make sense of this chaotic field, we'll break it down into the European heavyweights, the South American kings, the superstar dilemmas, Germany's quest, and finally, the ultimate expert predictions.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the European heavyweights, specifically Spain and France.
These 2 European giants represent the absolute pinnacle of football right now, but they approach the game with totally different philosophies. Take Spain's duality, for example. On one side of the ledger, you have absolute, pure midfield magic. The panel highlighted Pedri as quite possibly the best midfielder in the world right now. I mean, when Spain's midfield and wide players are clicking, they are virtually untouchable. But the flip side exposes some really serious defensive doubts. There are fatal flaws here. First, you have goalkeeper Unai Simon. While he is their undisputed number 1, there's this lingering feeling that he's always good for a huge, costly mistake in big games. Combine that with a defensive highline featuring players like Garcia and Cubarsí, and you have a recipe for vulnerability. If they push too high, they get exposed over the top. If they drop too deep, they lose their entire structure. It's a massive tactical tightrope.
France, on the other hand, counters Spain's structural questions with sheer, frightening depth across the entire pitch. You have William Saliba holding down the defense, Ousmane Dembélé and Kylian Mbappé ready to dynamically swap positions and just terrorize defenses with their pace, and a ridiculously stacked midfield with options like Tchouaméni and Rabiot. Now, sure, there are some minor concerns about Theo Hernandez in one-on-one defensive situations out wide, but honestly, France's overall roster makes them an overwhelmingly strong favorite. They simply have the deepest talent pool on the planet right now, hands down.
Moving across the Atlantic for Section 2, the South American kings, focusing on Argentina and Brazil.
The burden of history weighs incredibly heavily on these 2 nations. They are completely synonymous with World Cup glory, but they are entering 2026 facing very unique pressures. Starting with the defending champions, can Argentina actually defy history? Well, let's look at the reality of the situation. Key players like Alexis McAllister and Rodrigo de Paul have been underperforming at their clubs recently, almost like they're suffering from a post-World Cup hangover. That means the squad still completely relies on Lionel Messi. And yes, the moment Messi steps on the pitch, the team's entire energy and dynamic shifts. But even with his enduring magic, history is a brutal opponent. No team has repeated as World Cup champions since Brazil did it way back in 1958 and 1962. It's an incredibly rare feat, and the odds are intensely stacked against them.
Speaking of Brazil, they are staring down a painful 24-year drought. Since their triumph in 2002, they've been plagued by what is literally a quarter-final curse. Time and time again, they fall short right when the pressure mounts. But 2026 brings a massive wild card, the Ancelotti era. Breaking completely out of their historical comfort zone, Brazil has hired Carlo Ancelotti, their first manager ever from abroad. So why does this matter? Because a manager of Ancelotti's immense pedigree, with his joyful, player-focused man management style, might be the exact X factor they need to manage a squad full of forward divas and finally restore belief in the Brazilian camp.
Next up is Section 3, the superstar dilemmas, featuring England and Portugal.
What's really fascinating here is how individual gravity shapes the absolute destiny of both these contenders. They are wrestling with how to maximize, or perhaps just survive, their most iconic players. For England, everything revolves around the Harry Kane factor. Kane isn't just a traditional striker waiting in the penalty box, right? He constantly drops deep into the midfield. His link-up play essentially dictates the entire shape of the English team. But, and this is absolutely crucial, to make this work, it necessitates dynamic runners like Jude Bellingham and Bukayo Saka to recognize when Kane drops and explosively burst past him into the space he leaves behind. If those runners aren't there making those sprints, England's attack becomes entirely stagnant.
But to truly unlock this squad and overcome their historical traumas, especially those agonizing penalty shootouts we all remember, England has made a massive managerial shift. Gareth Southgate was known as a player whisperer, but he was often totally passive on the bench, sitting down while his teams lost tactical control in massive games against the likes of Croatia and Italy. Now, enter Thomas Tuchel. He brings an active, aggressive presence on the touchline and a razor-sharp tactical edge. He will literally demand that the players step up in real time, which might just be the exact medicine England needs to finally get over the finish line. Meanwhile, Portugal faces an incredibly delicate dilemma. Is a 41-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo holding them back? Think about it. This is a nation blessed with a true golden generation of talent. Players like Bernardo Silva are among the absolute best in the world. The stark reality is that Portugal has the talent to carry Ronaldo. But if they fall into the trap of making every single player work solely to service him, compromising their own natural games in the process, it could derail their entire tournament. And this dilemma breathes deep fear surrounding the Portuguese camp regarding their manager, Roberto Martinez. It leads to this heavy realization from the panel: I just don't believe the manager is strong enough to turn around to Ronaldo and say you're not starting. When the knockout stages arrive, difficult choices absolutely must be made. The consensus points to Martinez's identical past struggles managing Eden Hazard at Belgium, where he famously refused to bench a declining star, resulting in a disastrous campaign. Will history repeat itself in 2026?
Let's pivot to Section 4, Germany's quest. It's all about redemption for the hosts.
You know, you simply cannot talk about World Cup heavyweights without talking about the Germans. But their recent trauma is jarring. They were the absolute kings of the world in 2014. But since then, back-to-back group stage exits in 2018 and 2022. That is a shocking run for a nation of this caliber. Even though they are currently integrating incredible young talents like Florian Wirtz and Jamal Musiala under Julian Nagelsmann, those consecutive early exits mean they are carrying some serious psychological baggage into the 2026 cycle.
And the tactical issues are definitely still there. Their fatal flaw is undoubtedly at the back. They rely heavily on Joshua Kimmich playing out of position at right back. While he's a brilliant passer, he lacks the raw pace to defend tricky wingers in one-on-one situations. Combine that with center backs like Nico Slaughterbeck, who is often described as a gambler prone to making wild, tournament-ending decisions, and you have a defense that could completely collapse under the immense pressure of a knockout match.
Finally, Section 5, Final Expert Predictions. Let's get to the panel's verdict. So after navigating the strengths, the tactical shifts, and the glaring flaws of these titans, who actually takes the crown? Well, France heavily dominates the expert picks. Frank Leboeuf, Stevie, and Robo all firmly backed the French squad. But the verdict wasn't unanimous. Jurgen Klinsmann is trusting the Ancelotti factor to push Brazil over the edge. Ellie is backing Pedri and that Spanish midfield to control the tournament. And we even had a rogue dark horse vote going to Germany, citing that if it comes down to penalty shootouts, the Germans always find a way. But the overwhelming sentiment favoring France was beautifully captured by this quote from Stevie. If France need to play football to win this World Cup, I don't want to play football against them. They're too strong for you, too quick, too talented. That perfectly sums up the sheer intimidation factor of France's roster. The argument is simple. Their speed, their depth, and their raw talent are simply too much for any complex tactical setup to handle. When they click, they are literally a force of nature.
So we've laid out all the evidence. France's terrifying depth, Spain's tactical duality, Brazil's new Ancelotti era, Argentina's battle with the history books, the massive superstar dilemmas in England and Portugal, and Germany's desperate quest for redemption. With every single heavy hitter carrying a distinct flaw right alongside their immense talent, this field is wide open. So who do you think will overcome the gauntlet, survive those tactical tightropes, and lift the ultimate trophy in 2026? Let that sink in and keep analyzing.